A young nurse rescues a man from a frozen lake. It turns out he is a billionaire. He does the unbelievable. Emma, a 22-year-old nurse, was off shift that evening. She had just finished a grueling 12-hour rotation at the hospital, one that left her emotionally and physically drained. A quiet jog along the trail near Crescent Lake was her ritual escape. Her earbuds buzzed with soft instrumental music as she followed the trail curving gently around the lake. Snow crunched under her sneakers, and her breath came out in little clouds. She had gone nearly a mile when something disrupted the rhythm, a sound that didn't belong. A cry, faint and fragile, almost easy to ignore. She stopped. At first, she thought she'd imagined it. The wind was deceptive out here. Sometimes it moaned like voices. She pulled out her earbuds. There it was again. A desperate, muffled shout, a splash, a scream. Emma's pulse spiked. She darted toward the edge of the lake, scanning the horizon. Then she saw it. Movement beneath the ice about 30 feet from shore. A flailing hand appeared. A man was trapped beneath the surface. The lake had frozen over 2 weeks ago, but warm weather that afternoon had thinned the surface. He must have stepped onto a fragile patch. Emma didn't hesitate. She tore off her coat, dropped her phone, and ran onto the lake. The ice groaned with every step, splintering like thin glass under her weight. One misstep, and she could fall through too. But she didn't stop. Adrenaline pushed her forward, 5 feet, 10 feet. The man's movements slowed. He was slipping under. She dropped to her knees near the cracked edge and reached into the freezing water. Her arm vanished into the dark, numb almost instantly. Her fingers found his jacket, then his wrist. She gripped it tight and pulled. "Hold on," she screamed. He didn't respond. Bracing 1 foot behind her, she yanked with every ounce of strength in her body. The ice cracked further. Her leg plunged into freezing water. She cried out but didn't let go. Finally, his torso broke through the surface, slick with freezing water and blue with cold. She wrapped both arms around him and dragged him inch by inch until they were both lying on the solid ice. They weren't safe yet. He wasn't breathing. Emma leaned over his chest, her soaked hair sticking to her cheeks, and began chest compressions. "Come on," she whispered. "Come on." She tilted his head, pinched his nose, and gave 2 quick breaths. Her lungs burned. Her hands trembled. Again, compressions. Breathe again. Then he coughed. A violent, guttural gasp tore through his chest, water spilling from his mouth. His eyes fluttered, unfocused. He was alive. Emma let out a sob she hadn't realized she'd been holding. She pulled him into a sitting position and wrapped her coat around him, clutching his cold body close to her own. Sirens echoed faintly in the distance. Someone must have called when they saw the fall. "You're okay," she whispered. "You're safe. Just hold on." His lips moved, but no sound came out. They stayed like that, soaked and shaking, breath fogging the frozen air as red and blue lights reflected across the trees. Snow fell softly outside the hospital window, blanketing the world in white. It was the kind of snow that muted all sound, turning chaos into calm. Inside the hospital, however, the rhythm remained constant. Nurses moving briskly, machines humming steadily, and the ever-present scent of antiseptic in the air. Emma pushed open the door to room 207, coffee in hand, heart caught in that strange place between nervous and hopeful. It had been nearly 24 hours since the rescue, since she dragged a man from beneath the frozen lake and breathed life back into him with her bare hands. He hadn't woken up yet. The room was dim, illuminated only by the muted glow of the heart monitor and the weak winter light filtering through the blinds. The man lay motionless in the bed, chest rising and falling slowly, as though suspended somewhere between this world and the next. His face was peaceful, unfamiliar yet already etched into her memory. What hair he had dried and curled slightly at the ends. His lips were pale but no longer blue. Wires ran from his chest to machines monitoring his vitals, and a 4-bag hung above him, slowly dripping life back into his veins. Emma approached quietly, as though afraid to disturb him. A nurse walked in behind her, clipboard in hand. "Still no ID?" Emma asked in a whisper. The nurse shook her head. "Nothing. No wallet, no phone, not even a key." "What about his clothes?" Emma glanced at the neatly folded items sitting on a sterile table in the corner. A tailored coat, designer boots, and that watch. The nurse nodded toward the man's belongings. "Custom, probably worth more than my car." Emma's brows knit together. So he's someone important, or at least someone rich. The nurse's tone wasn't judgmental, just factual, but the words lingered in the air like perfume. Someone rich. But no one knew who he was. The mystery clung to him, wrapping around his unconscious body like a shroud. Emma moved to the chair beside the bed and sat down, setting her coffee on the floor. She reached out hesitantly, brushing her fingers along the blanket near his hand. Not touching, but close. She studied him for a moment in silence. I don't even know your name, she said softly, voice barely louder than a breath. But I know you've got a second chance. Most people don't get that. She paused. You could have died out there. I didn't even think, she whispered to herself. I just ran in. I didn't care who you were. I still don't. The heart monitor beeped steadily. She leaned forward slightly, eyes locked on his peaceful face. Whatever your story is, wherever you came from, it doesn't matter. What matters is what you do now. You've got a second chance. Don't waste it. A silence followed, thick, reverent. Then she sat back and exhaled slowly, her breath catching in the stillness. Over the next 2 days, Emma returned to the room each time she was on break. Nurses started to nod knowingly when she passed. She was that girl, the one who saved the frozen man. She didn't mind. The hospital was her world. And even when she wasn't working, she felt tethered to this stranger. She couldn't explain it. Maybe it was guilt. What if he didn't wake up? Maybe it was duty. She had started this. She had to see it through. Or maybe, deep down, it was curiosity. Who was he? And what had he been doing alone on a frozen lake? Each visit was the same. The room was still. The man didn't move. But Emma would sit beside him, read a few pages of whatever book was in her bag, or talk to him in quiet tones. Her words weren't elaborate. Sometimes she told him about her shift. Other times she simply talked about the snow or the smell of cinnamon rolls from the bakery across the street. She just didn't want him to feel alone. In case somewhere buried deep in his mind, he could still hear. Then, on the morning of the third day, something changed. Emma arrived early, a few minutes before her shift. Her hair was tucked under a knit hat, cheeks pink from the cold. She cradled her coffee as she pushed open the door to room 207, expecting the same scene. But this time, the air felt different. She paused. His head had turned slightly, just a fraction. Emma stepped closer. Then his eyelids fluttered, her breath caught in her throat. Hey, she whispered, barely daring to believe what she saw. His eyes opened slowly, unfocused at first, flickering as though adjusting to the light. Then they landed on her, clear, sharp, tense, and full of questions. She leaned closer, heart pounding. Can you hear me? He blinked once, then again. His throat moved as he tried to speak, but no sound came. Take it easy, she said gently. You've been unconscious for 3 days. He licked his lips and swallowed. His voice emerged as a gravelly whisper. Where am I? Crestview Hospital, she replied. You fell through the ice at Crescent Lake. A pause. You, he managed. You pulled me out. She nodded. A small, uncertain smile played at the corners of her mouth. Yeah, that was me. His eyes locked onto hers again, this time not with confusion but something deeper, gratitude. Ah, vulnerability. You saved me. The words were so soft they could have been mistaken for the wind. But Emma heard them, felt them. I guess I did, she said, her voice cracking slightly. The silence that followed wasn't awkward. It was full, charged. He looked down at his hands, then back at her. You stayed, he said. She smiled. I guess I did. Doctors and nurses rushed in a few minutes later. There were tests to run, scans to perform. Emma stepped back, giving them space, watching as they swarmed the man she had dragged from death. He didn't take his eyes off her as they examined him, even as they asked questions. Flashlights checked his pupils, reflexes tested. What's your name, sir? The attending physician asked. The man was quiet. Emma leaned forward slightly. I don't know, he said at last. The room fell completely silent. You don't remember? Emma asked softly. He shook his head slowly. Nothing. Just the lake, the cold, and then her face. He looked at Emma again, eyes searching. She pulled me out. Hours passed. Tests showed no sign of permanent damage. The doctors called it transient global amnesia, possibly caused by trauma, hypoxia, or extreme shock. The memory might return, or it might not. Throughout all of it, he remained calm. Curiously calm. Emma found herself drawn back to his room during her lunch break, standing hesitantly in the doorway, unsure if she was intruding. You can come in, he said, his voice stronger now. She stepped inside. He was sitting up in bed, dressed in a hospital gown, his dark hair brushed back. The roughness from before was gone, replaced by a sharp, intelligent gaze. Despite his condition, he seemed composed. Do you really not remember anything? She asked gently. He shook his head again. Just images, flashes, a city skyline, someone laughing, but it all slips away. Emma pulled the chair closer and sat down. He studied her quietly, as if trying to make sense of this strange new reality. "So, what's your name?" she asked softly. "Emma," he replied, the word tasting foreign on his tongue. "Emma Lewis," she said, offering a small smile. He repeated it slowly, as if trying to etch it into his memory. "Emma Lewis. And you don't remember yours?" "No," he said, a faint smile tugging at his lips. "Any guesses?" She smiled back. "Well, the nurses have been calling you Mr. Mystery." He laughed, a warm, rich sound that startled them both. "Hello." "Well, Miss Lewis," he said, tilting his head slightly, "thank you for saving Mr. Mystery's life." That night, as Emma walked home beneath a soft snowfall, her heart felt both heavy and light at the same time. The man she'd rescued, the stranger with no name, was awake, alive, and looking at her like she was the only steady thing in a world he no longer recognized. But deep down, Emma knew this was just the beginning. The next morning, the hospital corridors were eerily quiet, blanketed in that peculiar stillness that comes just before shift changes. Emma walked in carrying her usual thermos of lukewarm tea, her ID badge clipped to her chest, her thoughts already drifting toward room 207. The man with no name had begun speaking in full sentences yesterday. He'd remembered nothing, no address, no family, no profession, but he had remembered her. He'd thanked her again, with a rawness that lingered in her chest long after she left. Part of her had hoped today would bring more answers. Maybe a name. A glimpse into the life he'd lived before the lake, before the cold. But when she reached room 207, it was empty. Fresh sheets, blank monitors, no personal belongings. No signs that he had ever been there. Emma stared at the vacant bed, blinking slowly. She stepped inside, half expecting to find him hiding in the corner, or maybe chatting quietly with a nurse in the hallway, but there was nothing. No goodbye note. No forwarding contact. No message of thanks scrawled on the bedside chart. She checked with the front desk, asking if he had been moved or discharged. He checked out first thing this morning. The woman behind the counter said without looking up. He didn't want transportation. Walked out on his own. Emma paused. Did he leave a name? The woman shrugged. Nope. Said he had somewhere to be. Signed out as John Doe. We see it more often than you'd think. Emma stood still for a moment, the words hanging in the air like dust motes caught in sunlight. Then she offered a polite smile, murmured a thank you, and turned away. As she walked back down the hall, something unspoken twisted in her chest. She told herself it didn't matter. People left all the time. Some didn't want to be found. Some just needed a clean break. And maybe that was all he needed. Still, she had expected something. Even a scribbled note on a napkin. Thank you. Be well. Anything. That night, the wind whistled through the gaps in Emma's apartment windows, rattling them gently as the radiator clicked and clanked with its usual protest. Her small apartment was warm but quiet, filled only with the soft hum of city life outside. She sat at the kitchen table, cupping a mug of chamomile tea, letting the steam rise and kiss her cheeks. The kettle still sat on the stove, and the light above the sink buzzed faintly. A book lay open beside her, the one she'd been trying to finish for weeks, but she hadn't turned the page in 20 minutes. Her mind kept circling back to the image of the empty hospital bed. Why hadn't he said goodbye? It shouldn't have mattered. She had done her part. She had seen someone in danger, acted on instinct, and saved a life. That was what nurses did. It wasn't about thanks. It wasn't about recognition. It was about compassion, service, and moving forward. But this felt different. Not because she wanted something from him, but because it felt unfinished. Like a song cut off mid-course, like a door left half open. She exhaled and stared into her tea. Maybe he was overwhelmed. Maybe he truly didn't remember who he was and needed space to figure it out. Or maybe he did remember, and that was exactly why he left. Some people disappear because they are lost. Others disappear because they've finally been found, and it scares them. She rested her chin on her hand, watching the city lights blink through the curtain slats. Car horns echoed faintly in the distance. Somewhere in the building, someone was laughing. Life moved on, as it always did. Emma leaned back and closed her eyes. Sometimes, you save a life, and that's it. You don't get closure. You don't get answers. Sometimes, you just act, give all of yourself in a single moment, and then walk away, never knowing what your impact was. Maybe he was grateful in his own way. Maybe disappearing was his version of protecting her, from who he really was, or what came with him. Still, part of her hoped she'd see him again. Not for romance. Not for recognition. But because he'd started to feel like something more than just a stranger.